Okay, greetings and welcome to the Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 26th of November, 2023. I'm Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu, and I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. Hopefully you can see and hear okay. Sister Oleander, are you there with us?
I am. Excuse me, I've got a horrible cold, everybody. I'm really sorry. My voice is a little bit croaky, but I'm doing my best. Hope everybody's well.
Oh, thank you. And yes, and hopefully it will pass soon. Anyway, we're going to go through a review of community-related news that's occurred over the past 2 weeks. If you're watching live, it's always good to have a sound check, so let us know. You can drop us a message on Facebook or YouTube. We should also be streaming live on Twitter as well. Please don't forget to subscribe if this is your first time. And if you like what you're hearing, if you find it useful, please remember to click like and to share it, to retweet it or whatever they call it, as we go through. Now, as usual, we're going to start with libations to those that have recently passed and notable anniversaries. And I'm going to start the first we remember, which is to Elder Leonard Johnson. Now, Leonard, man of the people Johnson, was a father of two, and he passed of cancer aged 67 on November the 1st. He and many other young people of the Stonebridge estate founded the Harlesden People's Community Council, and they decided that they wanted to expand the region's or the borough's educational, social, and commercial development work. The big claim to fame came really in 1981 when he discovered a bus depot in Stonebridge was being sold by London Transport, and he worked with others to transform it into a community centre. And he did this by securing more than £1 million in funding to help Brent Council buy the property. Now, it became eventually the Bridge Park Community Leisure Centre in Harrow Road. It's a place where Raheem Sterling, for those of you who know football, even played when he was younger. Sadly, in 2014, Brent Council decided that they would sell the community centre to developers. There was quite a big campaign pushing against this. I remember hearing a lot of things on community radio stations. But apparently the council felt that it was far more important to have a sports centre, hotel, shops, and there were some homes as opposed to a community centre, which is dedicated to helping our community and its development. But we do remember Leonard, like I said, man of the people, Johnson. That's the phrase. A lot of people said he was a man of the people. The next libation is to George Brown, and he joined the ancestors at the age of 74. Now, for those of you who are thinking, I've seen that face somewhere before, but I can't just place it. Well, he was the co-founder and drummer and songwriter, and the songwriter part not many people know, for Kool and the Gang. Now, he passed away on the 16th of November after a battle with cancer. He was, like I said, 74 years of age, but he'd written some of the group's biggest hits, including Ladies' Night, Jungle Boogie, Celebration, Summer Madness, Too Hot. So he wasn't just a drummer, he was an integral part of the group. In fact, earlier this year in an interview, our elders said that the Kool and the Gang sound was the sound of happiness. And those of you who listen to their music will know very well that they brought joy when they played and when you listen to their tunes. There's always an uplifting occasion. That's what they were really about. He has an interesting history that when he was younger, he used to play with knives on, drum on everything. And then he went to a music store in Newark Avenue in Jersey City and took a $3 lesson. And then, after this lesson, everyone, the guy said to him, the tutor, man, you are natural. You really need to take this up. But he couldn't afford it. So his family kind of helped out as much as he could. He practiced continuously until he met the other band members, and eventually they formed this group. At first, they called themselves the Jazziacs. I think that's such a cool name. But then eventually, it became Kool and the Gang after Robert Kool Bell. So we remember libation to George Brown as he joins the ancestors. The next libation is to Raphael de Wamina. Now, this is a young footballer who joined the ancestors at the age of 28. This is one of those tragic tales. I mean, they're all tragic in a many ways when someone transitions, especially when they're young. while playing football. So he passed away on the pitch. He was playing football. He just fell to the floor and became unconscious. That happened around a fortnight ago. We now know that he had a recurring heart condition, but he decided to remove the defibrillator which was installed in him, which could have probably saved his life. But our brother, our ancestor now, didn't really want to quit for professional football, so he kept on going on. The doctor, his GP, says that he probably would have saved his life if he had not taken it out, but he wanted to live a full life, coming from an impoverished background. So we remember. This is a problem for many, footballers particularly from West Africa. I know my father passed away from a similar condition, cardiomyopathy. It's a hereditary issue as well, so it's not something I look forward to. But we remember. The next libation is actually a remembrance of an anniversary, which is quite a tragic anniversary, just out of the murder, and I'll say murder even though it's never been formally recognised as such, of Ricky Bishop. He joined the ancestors on this birthday, the 22nd of November, but in 2001. Now, Ricky was driving through Brixton with a friend at the time. The police stopped him, and they were running at the time something called Operation Clean Sweep. And then they stopped him, took him to Brixton Police Station. They say he came voluntarily. We don't know. But then something happened apparently, and he was attacked and held down by the police. And then he had a heart attack. Now, he was cuffed when he arrived from the police station at the hospital. But we now know that being held down by the police is most likely to have caused his death. None of the 8 police officers who were present did anything to help. They sent for a paramedic way too late. None were suspended or even prosecuted. Now, the coroner who looked into Ricky's case said that he had died from, and they use the phrase, a misadventure. It's a really horrible term. And they exonerated the police. So we like to remember Ricky Bishop because we've never received justice. We've never had a true answer to what took place. And his death was one of many that would follow this pattern of restraint and leading to death. That would come, to many young Africans time and time again since. The next libation is to an elder, Kenneth Severin. I say elder. Sorry, my mistake is on elder. He passed away at the age of 25. Now, he was a father of 2. What's the story? Well, he died after being stripped naked, handcuffed, and held down on the floor during a struggle with 7 officers. Now, this is in Belmarsh prison. He was suffering from severe mental health issues at the time, and he was imprisoned after being charged with attempted burglary. And this was after he tried to get into his own, or I shouldn't say his own, his former home, because he was homeless at the time. So he was homeless. He tried to break into his own home. He was arrested and eventually imprisoned for this. Now, like I said, he died after being held down, stripped naked and handcuffed by 7 officers in Belmarsh prison. There was an inquest into his death, and it recorded an open verdict citing a term that many of us will shudder when we hear it, and we're starting to get used to the phrase, positional asphyxia following restraint. Now, this positional asphyxia has been a contested diagnosis of, of these situations. I think it took George Floyd's murder before people recognized. I say people, obviously African people always recognize this, but I'm talking about people inside the criminal justice system who supported officers who fought compressing people's necks and jumping on them. It was like 6, 7, or in the previous case, 8 officers was actually not going to put someone's life at risk. And so in this case, there was an inquest. And the Parliamentary Ombudsman said that the complaints that were made at the time about his treatment at the hands of the prison service were fully justified. You know, the indignity and the inhumane treatment that they placed him under. It doesn't bring back Kenneth Severin, and and obviously his children have still lost their father, and their family lost a kindred or soul. But again, this continuous positional asphyxia is something that we are continuously having to fight. We move on to the next story, and this one, if the others didn't break your heart, this one probably will. This is not one of the states. This is a libation that's come from one of our listeners, and or I say listeners, our watchers. I want to give thanks for sharing libation. Remember, this is your program, it's your channel, and it's just to remember that on the 13th of November in 2009, that Damali Amanda Sala Peters transitioned to the realm of the ancestors. Now, Damali means beautiful vision, and her mother described her as being a very loving bundle of joy with the energy of a queen. You know, a dear friend of our family, we remember, and we pour libation for beautiful Damali. Now, the last two libations we're going to make to historical figures, that important dates that you won't see on the news, you won't see remembered and honoured, but we should do because it's relevant to us. And the first, that beautiful smile, that beautiful face, belongs to Kwame Ture, who joined the ancestors at the age of 57. Now, he passed away in Guinea from prostate cancer. He actually argues that, or he argued, I should say, that it's possible that that cancer could have been induced by the American state. I mean, it's even possible. But he was an amazing advocate for our people. I mean, many of you will know him as Stokely Carmichael, and leader of the Black Panther Party. He changed his name, what we call reclaimed, in 1977 to honor Kwame Nkrumah Sekou Toure, which is why Kwame Ture came about as his name. But one of the many, many legacies, the two that stick in my mind, is, of course, the famous rally cry of Black Power, just understanding that African people have power, that we're not powerless, and when we work together, there's nothing that we can't achieve. And the concept, the original concept of institutional racism. Now, in the UK, that term has been co-opted and claimed by Macpherson, who put it in his report. But if you look back and some of the early readings of Nkrumah, of Kwame Ture, not Nkrumah, especially when he came to London, what was it for? It was for the politics of violence. I think was it politics of violence? Yeah, it was an anti-university event, the first anti-university event in 1967, and he wrote about this. This is when he first coined the concept of institutional racism. Often we invent things and others will try and claim it for themselves, but this was Kwame Ture's gift to us. So we remember. And the final we remember for this section is of an amazing ancestor, the African Brazilian freedom fighter known as Zumbi dos Palmeiras. Now, he was, like I said, a freedom fighter, organizer of what's known as the Quilimbos. For those of us in the UK who are not familiar with that term, think about maroon settlements, if you can imagine. But this time, all over Brazil, with around 30,000 Africans living in them in safety and fighting for resistance against Portuguese tyranny and enslavement. So he was a freedom fighter for many, many years. He was murdered by the Portuguese. They pulled together a force of 6,000 soldiers, and it took them a 40-day or 42-day siege, I think it was, to murder him. But they didn't murder him on the battlefield. They when they finally was able to catch him, they catched him alive. They then decapitated him and then exhibited his head in public. And they did that 2 days ago in 1695. And their message was, we're going to exhibit his head to kill the legend of his immortality. And so it's very important, I feel, that we keep that spirit of his resistance, his brilliance alive. He's Zumbi is a legend, and the day is celebrated in Brazil, despite the desires of the Portuguese to to diminish the accomplishments of our ancestor. And so we here in the UK, we remember Zumba do Palavras. And apologies for mangoing the Portuguese language. It's not my first tongue. That's it for the libations. Well, I should say you are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Remember, if you're watching us live, you can interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. I see Sister Oleander has just joined us on the screen, so I suspect that some of you might have done so. Sister Oleander, can you say something?
Yeah, so I have a message from Mr. The 4-3. And he says, one of my favorite authors, Samuel R. Delaney, talks about doing detention with Toure in high school. He had good things to say about him. And then he says, yeah, then he says, The Motion of Light in Water is the name of the book.
Okay, I haven't heard that one, but I'll look out for that.
Okay, and Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation sends us greetings.
Greetings, and it's good to have you all with us, and thank you for the check to let us know that we're going out okay and that you can hear and see us as well. I'm going to continue on with the program. We're going to go through the section we call UK News and Politics. Don't forget to subscribe if you like what we're doing, to like and share, especially to those who are not familiar, those who are only subject to kind of like the mainstream media, who kind of don't really know what's going on in our community, especially from an Afrocentric or Pan-African perspective. Anyway, let me keep moving on with the news. So this first story is about, we spoke about Shell in last week's program, or last fortnight's program. And this is now, we now know that they're going to face prosecution or claims really for their pollution in the Niger Delta. Now this has come about because a London High Court ruled that the thousands of villagers in Nigeria have a right to bring this human right claim and challenge them over the destruction of their way of life. It's a really important ruling. I say that it's really frustrating that it should be a London court and a British judge that's making these rulings about the lives of people in Africa. It always irritates me, but this is where it is right now, because this ruling does have legs. It means that more than 13,000 farmers and fishers from the Ogali and the Bilay communities in the Niger Delta are entitled to bring legal claims against Shell. And this is really important because they want to talk about their breaches to their right to a clean environment. And what makes it quite groundbreaking is that the judge ruled it was arguable that the pollution had fundamentally breached the villagers' right to a clean environment under the Nigerian constitution and also the American Charter on Human and People's Rights. And see, this is the reason why it's important. We often hear about the European Convention on Human Rights, but every nation state has, their right and often tweaks and changes this schema, because what one nation regards as human rights, another will see it as abusive. So the Nigerian constitution, they have provisions that the people's rights under their human rights have no limitation period. So there's no, you might have heard the term statute of limitation. That's really when a judge tends to throw out a claim and says like, well, you took too long to bring this to court. Well, in this particular instance, there is no statute of limitation, so they can bring this claim. Now, Shell, of course, is arguing back. Shell is saying, look, we have our subsidiary in Nigeria, the Shell Petroleum Development Company, and they accepted responsibilities. They've already made, kind of apologies and compensated. I don't know if they apologized, but they did compensate. They reckon that they compensated the affected parties that was required by Nigerian regulations. And I think that's my big problem there, because they did make some payments back in the day. But one of the things that we have to recognize in Nigeria is that making compensations to people in Nigerian government is not the same thing as compensating those who are affected by the pollution, whose lives are materially destroyed by the actions of Shell. And so Shell might deny that it has a duty of care to all those who are directly affected by its action, but let's go to court. Let's hear this argument, because I'm one who believe that they do have a duty of care. So that's that story. A little bit legalistic, but hopefully, it'll help. The next story, talking about legalistic, is a strange one as well. This one makes me think about what can I say? This one, we've spoken all the programs. We keep talking about the situation about the reparations movement, and the reparations movement is going ahead full steam ahead, and I kind of love the way it's moving forward. And we've seen many in our community deal with that. We've seen, of course, the amazing sister Esther Ekwe Halsey deal with this. She's our lead reparationist in the UK. We've also seen, Brother Glenn Ryan, we've seen the GAC, and we've seen many others talk about this. But over the last, I'd say, 6 to 12 months, ever since the emerging of the Heirs of Slavery, which is a group of descendants of enslavers, there's been a shift in the way that this has been moving forward. And Baba Gus John, I should say Professor Gus John, he questions this focus that does not extend beyond allegations of African enslavement to include indentured labor of South Asia. It doesn't look beyond what happened after so-called abolition. And he says that the Heirs of Slavery are taking the recent fad of allyship to a totally new level. And it's an amazing piece that he's written here. I mean, he argues that this is one that's seeing the allies instead of those who are actually being wronged. It's the allies that are now determining the agenda of who it is that the healing and repair is targeted at. And I've got to say, I completely agree with him. In fact, his exact words, the quote here is, rather than seeking to be our reparation allies, they should collectively set their own agenda. They should demand that the British state, the monarchy, the Church of England, and hundreds of their fellow heirs set out a timetable for delivering repatriation and climate justice, including non-repetition. I mean, I've got to admit, I want to be able to call out BS like Baba Gus John when I grow up, because he's got it right on. I mean, he also, there's a quote in his article that comes from Professor Hilary Beckles at the CARICOM Reparations Committee from the University of West Indies. It's a, I don't want to get up to mischief. Maybe you should read the quote for yourself. Actually, it's one where it highlights the fact that Laura Trevelyan, and Laura Trevelyan, if you don't remember, is the woman who is the BBC journalist who decided that she's going to quit her job and she's going to start jumping on the mission for reparation. And thank you. It's good you recognise this. You had this moment of kind of like moral clarity, and you're helping out and stuff like that. But what's happened now is that she's the inaugural chair, or for this group that's looking at what do they call it? I wrote it down somewhere. The Caribbean and African Advocacy. This is with the PJ Patterson Institute for Caribbean and African Advocacy. So she's the inaugural occupancy of this. Well, she's the first person, to kind of like lead this. I don't understand how that works, right? How does the descent of an enslaver become appointed by Africans, us, to lead the reparations movement? And this is why it's important that we have elders like Baba Gus John, Professor Baba Gus John, to question these kind of moves, because I'm quite surprised, if I'm really honest with you, with those who are actually green lighting and signing off on this. But that's another story for another day. Okay, the next story. Oh gosh. Okay, he's back. Oh, he's back. And when I say he's back, I'm talking about David Cameron. I think, did we mention this 2 weeks ago? I don't know if it happened 2 weeks ago when the crazy one, what's her name? Suella Braverman. Sorry, I don't know why my brain froze. Suella Braverman was kicked out of government. She'd gone too far, blah, blah, blah. I mean, she only did what they wanted her to do. They knew exactly who she was. Richie, he appointed her, even though she had broken the rules before and been kicked out of government before. But he brought back David Cameron They made him a lord in 24 minutes. And that's really important as well, how quickly he made him a lord. It's happened before, but it's really important to recognize that when people tell you that these trinkets, these memberships to the Empire Club is done solely on merit, what does that mean when somebody can just be made a lord just like that, 24 hours? It tells you it's got nothing to do with merit. You know, there's something else going on here, but that's another discussion. I'm not going to go into that OBMBE thing. He's been made a lord. And everyone, well, I say everyone in political say, oh my God, David Cameron's back, blah, 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 blah. Maybe he can make things look grown up and blah, blah. Well, actually, let's just have a quick check on what David Cameron did when he was Prime Minister. Because one, you know, many of us kind of like in our minds have Theresa May as being the key architect of the Windrush policy, right? She's the one who's clearly behind the dehumanizing policy, sending the vans around, go home, all that kind of nonsense. But actually, if you talk to ministers who were around at the time, then they will tell you that it was Cameron as the coalition prime minister who was the driving force, not Theresa May. So even though Amber Rudd, who was, you know, having a relationship with Kwasi Kwarteng at the time, and Theresa May, they were the face of it. The person pushing it was David Cameron. Also remember that in 2010, Cameron pledged to bring down annual net migration by ignoring where migrants came from, what they had come to Britain for, what they were escaping, or even what their skills were. So some of the rhetoric you're hearing now isn't new. It's completely true. I mean, you know, it's completely part of his legacy. Something that Ligali focused on at the time as well in 2010 was that it was Cameron who authorized the police to use racial profiling after the European Court for Human Rights condemned the abuse of Section 24, which is a terrorism act by the police, after they had stopped and searched over 100,000 people, but made not a single terrorism attack. You know, this is when Ligali, I mean, it's 2010 is Ligali's hate time, you know what I mean? 100,000 people under the Terrorism Act without a single arrest for terrorism. Let that sink in. And then for those of us who think, oh, well, you know, bygone be bygones, that's in the past, let's move on, blah, 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 blah. Well, let's just remember also, in 2015, Cameron flew off to Jamaica. And what did he gift Jamaica? Well, first of all, he refused to apologize, you know, regret, blah, 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 sorrow, blah, 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 all that kind of nonsense. And then he announced, to the shame, I feel embarrassed because we shouldn't be taking these offers from the British government, but he announced a £25 million prison deal. So Britain would build this prison in Jamaica from the foreign aid budget, right? Because prison is foreign aid, right? Building a prison. It's not, you know, because that's what you do with foreign aid money. You don't feed people, you know, clean water and all the stuff you see in those Oxfam videos. You just build more prisons in our countries. And he would use that to ship over 300 Africans with Jamaican heritage back to Jamaica. That was the rationale behind it. David Cameron, he's back. So just don't be fooled if any kind of silly rhetoric comes around how he's the grown up in the room. He's just as bad as all of them. Politics. Okay, next story. Spent too much longer on him. Sister Oleander.
Yeah. Black Lives Matter UK say Professor Gus John is absolutely right.
%100%. He's always right. So I can't hear you, Sister Oleander. Was there something else you wanted to say, or?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Don't apologize. No, Professor Gus John is always been on it. You know, sometimes it's just, you know, from giving back his, you know, the MBE and turning it down. I mean, his work in Hackney, running education service. I mean, he's consistently. What's that thing he did with Jerry Germain? The Exclusions Project. God, I'm getting old. You know, he's consistently, and we don't know his name. I mean, you may know his name, I may know his name, but he's not a household name, right? I think we spoke a few months ago about how many people in our community can't name anyone in the UK, you know, who's a historical figure who's done some work. And people like Elder Professor Gus John, they're living legends, just like, you know, Professor Hakeem Attic, they're living legends. They're here. and yet we still don't know who they are. Anyway, let me move on because those things just irritate me. Okay, so the next story, talking about reparations, is basically about an agreement between African Caribbean nations to agree this move to seek reparations for slavery. I'm a little bit worried about this, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a good, definitely a good move in the sense that it's a Pan-African initiative that both the Caribbean and African are coming together. I think I spoke in the last program that there was a conference in Ghana on this issue, and so that's where they decide with this pact that they're going to form this global movement, and that was amazing. That's really good. It's a united front. They're going to put pressure on European nations. But what I don't like is the language. It's always about we're going to put pressure on European nations to pay for historical mass crimes, to pay, yeah, not to make reparation. There's a big difference between payment for reparations and to reparate for reparations. You see, reparations does have a compensatory element. It is going to cost, but that's not the focal point. And when you, anyway, I'm just like preaching to the converted, I suppose. We had to understand what reparations mean. It goes beyond money. But the good news is that this partnership between the 55-member African Union and the Caribbean community, which is often known as CARICOM of 20 countries, is aiming to intensify the pressure on former slaving nations. And this is a good thing. They are also talking about putting together this global fund, which we're based in Africa, aiming to accelerate the campaign. Now, I'm not sure whether it's a global fund, which is each of us are, I'm talking about nations, are contributing towards, or they'll get donations from some of these people like there is a slavery to do and stuff like that. And it's a good initiative if it's got grassroots representation. I mean, it was nice to hear that our sister Belle Ribeiro Ade was over there. She attended the conference, and she's recognised it as a huge step forward. And she makes this comment about they've sent a very clear message that this is something that can't be ignored anymore. So it's good that there are some people that we know that are involved in this. But I'm always suspect when nation or the heads of nation states start making these moves, these shady moves, because they often get paid off. And then the people that are living with the legacies of enslavement, let alone, I've not heard anything about colonization as with colonial enslavement isn't part of the Ma'afa. I start to get worried. But I don't want to put a dampener on something that sounds like a good initiative, a good start. So there's that story. The next issue I want to talk about is Freshfields Bruckhaus Deringer. I'd never heard of them before, believe it or not. That sounds how ignorant I am. But what they're doing is investigating their historical ties into Ma'afa or into African enslavement. Now, I had to do a quick bit of research and found out that they're an elite city firm. They've decided that they're going to extend the research into their own history and their own role in the Ma'afa between the 18th and 19th century. And this is because they were founded in 1743, and I say recently, they had to, not too long ago, express regret, that phrase again, regret, that when they found out that one of their founding partners financially benefited from acting as a trustee for several slavers in the Caribbean. Now, this is something we only found out because of research by UCL. It's one of the good things about working at University College London. There are some really good eggs who do this work. But the co-founder and his sons and another trustee, we later found out, also enslaved 15 Africans in 1827 directly. They say it was temporary, but they were directly involved. They kind of talk about it in terms of shifting assets, like as if you can own people. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a nonsense. You don't move ownership of a human being. The moment you are enslaving them, you have responsibility for them. If you don't set them free, then you are an enslaver. So they enslaved another 15 Africans in 1827. So let's see what comes from that. We've seen the banks, we've seen insurance companies. This is a legal firm from what I can tell. One thing that I am looking forward to, though, is that I've just found out there's going to be a new Black History Walks next year by the amazing Tony Warner. That's going to be taking place around Lloyd's. So I think it's coming out in March, and I'll definitely be on that one. It's called, guess this, Fighting the Slave Master. So, Tony, he doesn't ramp, tells the truth as it is. Looking forward to that one as well. So keep an eye out on this story as well. There are many, many, many institutions in that corner, the City of London, in that financial space, that legal space, involved in Ma'afa. Hey, Sister Oleander.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter UK say David Cameron's return is not welcome and glad you shared your take. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. I think, yeah, many people forget. I mean, I'm not even going to go into the history of enslavement in his own personal family. Um, no, he's not. He's not welcome. And what I just don't want, and the reason why this program exists, is that those of us in the community who are unaware of the history from behind, we don't get caught up in some of the narratives that get pushed on the state media. And when I say state, I shouldn't say state media. Actually, the BBC's trying. I can't believe it. On some of the mainstream media, that's probably a better and more accurate term, which will kind of like frame him in this kind of mythical glow, like he is, he's different from all the rest of them, when actually he's just as bad and rotten as all of them. Okay, let me move to the next story, which is that of this story about the legacy of the Industrial Revolution hero, one Henry Court. That's the image you can see in the top. And again, like I said, that's why I love working at UCL. We have this really interesting story from Dr. Jenny Balstroh. That's the woman you can see in the image. Now, she did some research on the iron making process in 1784 in Jamaica. And she found out that Henry Court patented the idea, which he stole from those enslaved Africans. Now, and people say, well, kind of like, well, how do you know that and stuff like that? Well, she did what every historian does. She looked at archives. She looked at a combination of shipping records. She looked at old newspapers. She looked at evidence. She did all the conventional methods that a historian will do. And the paper was peer reviewed. It's been confirmed that it's legit. But the Redwick papers, the Mail, the Express, all those kind of racist papers, they found and dug up this old professor called Robert Toombs who disagrees, and he's saying, "Oh well, the scholars are, they're using history not as a means to understand the past, but they're pillaging it to support present day activism." Well, these kind of guys, they always wheel them out whenever someone challenges the mythical narrative around white supremacy. But in this particular case, he's turning to a hiding because she did the work. She's done due diligence. There might, there might be more information that we find out later on. There was something in her original paper where she made a mistake, and she found out. She immediately acknowledged it and addressed it. It doesn't mean the rest of her paper was invalid, and other peers who have reviewed her paper have actually confirmed its validity. So, yeah. Just as a reminder, often when you hear about the Industrial Revolution and you hear about how amazing it was, and kind of like how this European invention transformed the world, it's important to also remember, even if we don't go to Eric Williams' capitalism and slavery, just on the ground, you're having these I don't know what to call them, clowns. Let's call them clowns. Sorry, these colonial clowns coming to territories where they're enslaving African people, watching what they're doing, watching how they're melting and smelting, and the technology and the techniques they're using, writing them down, and then getting a patent on them, and then claiming it for them, and then ending up in history books. No, in Ogoso. Okay, we have geniuses, and some of those geniuses were African metallurgists in Jamaica. So thank you, Jenny, for this important piece of research. Okay, where are we now? So this section is called Afrophobia and White Supremacy. For those of you who are new to the channel, you are watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. We stream live every couple of weeks, and we just cover the news, what's taking place over the fortnight. You are welcome to interact with us through Facebook, through YouTube, or Twitter. Sister Oleander's in the studio. You can send a message. You can ask a question or share some facts, whatever. I mean, it's your program. I'm just a big mouth that talks it out. And as ever, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share if you like it. But yeah, let me just go through. Now, please, this is, like I said, Afrophobia and white supremacy. So be gentle on yourself. It'll be irritating. It's irritating for me to even read it, but this is the nature of the place that we're living in. So the first story is that of the white supremacist who goes by the name of Reverend, quotation marks, James Costello. Now, James, 38 years from Kirkby, plastered what he called this motto, creativity movement. and he created stickers all over Liverpool to encourage people to visit his website, which was calling for the establishment of what they call a white master race. He was a straight out racist and using kind of like young people techniques to kind of like market himself. Now the police found out that he had a direct connection with other convicted terrorists, literally. And the judge who actually looked at the material said that his home, the material that he had on the website, was dripping with hate. That's his words, dripping with hate. But it's impossible to know how big the movement is. And that's because of the internet, because of what we're going through right now. He just thinks that it could be far bigger than what they could ever find out. Now, the defendant, who I don't understand this Reverend Connolly thing, but he referred to himself, and it was known as Reverend Connolly in the Church of the Creator, was jailed for 5 years. It's important to know these stories because this is new, right? This isn't like 100 years ago, this isn't 10 years ago. This is like, all this is in the last couple of weeks, right? The next story, just in case you think that it's a one-off, or just another reminder, meet one William Howitt. I feel like, what's his name? Rod Sterling from the Twilight Zone. Meet William Howlett, 27, an ex-soldier who admired Adolf Hitler and planned to burn down a bookshop in Nottingham. Now, he's been found guilty of preparing a terrorist act. I wish I could say this was in the Twilight Zone, but it's not. It was in England, 2023. Now, his plan included painting a swastika on the wall, White Lives Matter. It referenced smashing up the windows, dousing books and upholstery with petrol. I think the police decided to go in because he started buying all the material, the fuel, all the things that he was going to use, and they realized, oh my gosh, we're going to have to just nick him because or he's going to do it and somebody's going to get hurt. But in court, he denied it from what I read in the article. But the court revealed that he was very angry and increasingly so over the summer of 2021 and 2020. And if you remember those times, that was, of course, Black Lives Matter protests. That was, a difficult time for white supremacists because, they were just pent up in their own house, staring in the mirror, looking at themselves, hearing their own voices and realizing how horrible they were, and they wanted to vent on someone. He was also anti-Semitic as well. So, but this thing goes. So, let's not make him any more famous than it needs to be. But it's important to remember he was an ex-soldier. So we've spoken about this recruitment issue. What is the recruitment policy that keeps pulling in these racists into the police, into the armed forces? What is it that the bar is so low that they can be extremists and plan to murder and to burn and to terrorize, and yet they are happy, to recruit them? I don't get it. What does it say about the leadership? Let me move on to the next story. And okay, so this one is another interesting one. This is a bit of a nerdy one. I'm sorry. This is about a study by the Museum of London, which shows that African women were more likely to die in what I'm calling, and people now call, the medieval plague. I make that point because it was previously referred to as the Black Death. That was the term. So if you heard about the Black Death, you go to Museum of London, they had a big exhibition on it. It's now being referred to as medieval plague because people, I think, are starting to recognize that these kind of things are a little bit triggering and a bit racist in their construction. But essentially what happened was that between 1348 and 1350, there was this deadly infectious outbreak which swept across Europe and Asia, and it killed millions of people, millions. And everyone just has left it at that. That's done. But what's happened with this study is that it's come about that, hold on, we are starting to see a pattern that those who are more likely to die were African women, specifically African women. There were people of other backgrounds, but it's African women inside that. And, it's important, first of all, and I'm hands up to acknowledge that the research is based on 145 individuals. And that's a very small sample. And they took them from 3 cemeteries. This is the thing about anthropology, archaeology, etc. It's like, even when there's not written paper, written evidence, one of the good things that we can do with science and what we can do with nerds like me is that we can actually take remains. I don't subscribe to taking remains from cemeteries, but there are those who do, or when they move them, and they can do tests on the bones and they can kind of work out who they are, where they migrated from. So that's what's happened. And so this particular outbreak, the medieval plague, killed around 35,000 Londoners. That's the number that's been recorded. But what's happened is that the people who did the report have come to the conclusion that this is evidence that this devastating result, which has disproportionately affected African people in 1348, 13, not 23, but 1348. And let me give you the exact quote, is the result of the devastating effects of pre-modern structural racism in the medieval world. And the evidence is there in the skeletons. So it's really interesting, right? So, we didn't have the language at that time. We didn't have the language afterwards, but now we know that when we talk about structural racism, something existed even back then that placed African people at risk, in this particular case, African women. Now, the reason why you can see the mark of Kemi Badenoch on the screen is because she argues that it's unreliable research. So the sample is too small and it's not good, and it's making people not trust medical medical services, and saying that the health services are wonderful, and kind of like having distrust of it is kind of like is awful. But then we know Kemi Badenoch is kind of like is what we'd call an unscientific ideologue. So she will put out statements and she'll frame them in language which sounds very logical, but actually there's no scientific base or fact or rationale or solid conclusions. She just extrapolates things that kind of map onto her own preordained ideas about white supremacy, despite obviously being an African with heritage from a region called Nigeria. The reason why the other face is there, Michael Marmot, is because, just as a reminder, he is a famous scholar, another UCLM, and I'm not biased towards UCL scholars before anyone says that, but he did do an amazing piece of research on public health. He's quite reputable. Most people not challenge that. He's quite rigorous in his work. And when the government, which Kemi Badenoch was part of, put out the Creed report, which was that thing by Toyin Sewell. I won't use the phrase that everyone normally uses in closed places, but that the Creed report, which was supposed to look at the disparities facing people of African and other minority ethnic backgrounds during COVID. Why were we dying disproportionately? And it concluded that there was no other reason from the fact that we're stupid, and that I mean, he didn't say it in those exact words, but it was saying that structural racism didn't exist, that Britain was a post-racial society, that slavery was the transatlantic experience. I mean, it was just an awful piece of paperwork. Well, it's just to remind you that Marmot came out and just said, no, that piece of shoddy work, if you want to call it work, used outdated references. It underplayed structural racism in health outcomes, and it was without merit. And so I just kind of place this in context, because what we're seeing now is Kemi Badenoch, who has no experience in this sector, challenging a Museum of London study with scholars who've actually done the work, right? And of course, and her comments are published in some racist paper. I can't remember if it was the Express or the Mail or the Times or the Sun, whatever. It was one of those kind of C papers. All right, I told you it's a bit nerdy. Let me move on to the next story. Get ready. It's another irritating one. Okay, meat. Oh, God. Meet the Bean family. Okay, so 4 members of a single family in 2022 launched a racist attack on their neighbors. They doused them in alcohol. They chased them down the street with an axe. They shouted racial abuse. Now, thankfully, they have now all been put in prison, apart from the very youngest one. I think it's gone to one of those youth centres. I forgot what you call them. So the one that you can see here, David, 52 years old, is the elder. But the rest of them involved range from 23, 29, and 19. I can't say much about them. I don't want to say much about them. The maximum sentence, which was given to this one over here, was 21 months in prison. And according to South Yorkshire Police, the victims that they harassed and that they went over with the axe, can you imagine how horrifying it is to have a whole family screaming racist abuse coming down the street with you an axe? They literally, when I say they threw petrol, they didn't just miss, they threw petrol on them, or alcohol, trying to put them on fire. The victims suffered only minor injuries. Horrific. This happened in 2022, June. Sister Oleander.
I just wanted to say this is so disgusting. I mean, to me, that was attempted murder. I don't understand why all he got was 21 months. And if he got 21 months, yeah, exactly. So it just shows you that our lives don't matter as much as they pretend that they think it does. They don't. You know, imagine the thought process that family went through to do that. It's just hateful. It's hateful, and that kind of hate has no place to be living among people. It just makes me so angry.
Yeah, and it's not just one of them.
Exactly.
It's a whole family. But it's just a reminder of where we are, where we're living, and some of the things that do happen when everyone says that we live in a nice Teletubby world where we're post-racial and everything's okay. It's important to remember that, no, there are some seriously disturbed people out there who hate us just because we're different. Now, this story, we don't have the ethnicity of the group that they chased, but it was clearly, and it was 100% a racist attack on their neighbours. But let's move on. Let's take his face off our screen. I think we've graced them up enough fame infamy for too long. Thank you. So the next story is Victor Adibawale, and he's made this really strong statement where he says, look, we need, and he uses the word black, I don't use the word black, but he uses black leaders leading black funds, and he's talking about African leaders, African people, deciding where funding goes for African businesses. Now, this is, he made these comments after his report on inequity or inequality, I should say, but it is inequity in the UK social investment area. So he I can't remember the name of his organisation that he runs now. He used to do the homeless one. I've forgotten what he's doing now, but I know he deals with business and kind of inequality. He commissioned a report. There was this event by JC Stewart. You can see the sister talking in the event in the picture below. She runs an organisation. She's the CEO. She runs an organisation called For Business Sake. And our brother Victor is just saying, look, the reason why there's slowness in the UK when it comes to social investment in African business is simply because they identify, or they have an inability to identify the opportunities in African people and communities. At best, that's what he's saying. But at worst, it's just plain simple racism, right? That's it. They don't want to invest in us because they don't want us to progress. So, and he's one of the moderate ones, right? You might see him in on Question Time or, a few news broadcasts and stuff like that. He's, very reasonable, well thought out. But he's one of the moderates. He has much more hope in some of these structures than I do. He's been, fettered by them and stuff like that. But he's just saying that, look, it's a year on sort of published report and you're not taking any of the recommendations seriously. Let's just not do anything. It's like, you can't pretend that there is no investment opportunities for African people in the UK and in our communities. That's just ridiculous, So, I'll leave that. That's the last on that particular section. Whew. So, just as a reminder.
Yeah, hi. We have another message from Cosmic Jedi. It's like Arkham. Put them in prison and then they come back out and repeat.
Sorry, you almost made me spill my drink out. Arkham, for those of you who don't know, is the roller coaster that goes round and round in Gotham. It's like a Penguin and Joker and Frost, and kind of like, you keep arresting them, you keep putting them in prison, and come back around, and it's complete. It's a great analogy. I love it. Okay, just for those of you that know, you are watching Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. I'm your host, Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu, in the studio with Sister Oleander. If you have something you want to share, please put it in the chat like everyone else is. You can comments, questions as well. It's your program, your channel. You're free to interact with us. We're on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. So whichever platform works for you, go ahead and do it. Don't forget to subscribe. I keep saying these things, but I'm really rubbish at it. like, and share. Sharing's important as well. It's always good to get a new member, someone else to push it. I don't do any promotion of this stuff. I haven't got enough time for that. It's down to you. If you like it, you think it's useful, push it down the throat of someone else who can get some benefit out of it. I can't do that. My job is to produce it. Anyway,
Toyin, we've got another message from Cosmic Jedi. He says, face blue smiling, face blue smiling, face blue smiling, face blue smiling.
I suspect that he didn't say. I suspect that was one of those emoticons, and it didn't come up.
Oh, I thought he was talking about the rotating door. That's what I thought.
Okay.
So they come through and they just go round and round and round.
You could be right. I could be wrong.
I don't know.
But talking about rotating doors, we're going to go into a section which is now UK policing matters. Get ready for the vomit. Let's go. So let's start off with Project Alpha. For those of you who don't know, Project Alpha is a specialist task force that's part of the Metropolitan Police, and it's responsible, guess what, for gathering intelligence from social media profiles. Now, if you're watching this, they monitor YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. So I'm probably going to be accused of radicalizing you. So don't do anything naughty and say, "Look, Daddy made me do it." Okay, because they're monitoring us now. They monitor, and this is also really nefarious. They also monitor not just open and public spaces, but also private spaces. So if you think you've got a group and you're chatting in your group and you think you're all safe to kind of say "Bomb Babylon," they're in there. One of those faces that look like you is not you. One of those faces is them from Project Alpha. And they say that the aim of doing this is preventing gang crime, and that's why they get permission to break the law and do whatever they want to do that. Now, to date, it's received almost £3 million in funding from the Home Office. Yeah, the Home Office that was run by Suella Braverman, now James Cleverly, got the irony of that name, and before them, Priti Patel. So they say that, here's your £3 million. Go and spy on people in their social media platforms, and anyone that's putting out there hateful or insightful content, start an investigation on them. And of course, that's why you started hearing about people being arrested for calling people coconuts. I mean, because that's a real good use of public funding. Right? They arrested that woman who had the picture of Braverman and Sunak and the coconut. They actually arrested her. You can't even make that sort of stuff up, because she had a poster with them and a coconut on it. So this is a real task force, Project Alpha. And in the past, detectives have said that they've been able to decipher lyrics on some of the songs that have been uploaded on the internet. And they say that they're catching young people bragging about real life violent crime, and that's how they're going to use that to kind of determine who the criminals are and stuff like that. But what's happened in the last couple of weeks, that there's been discussion around this, because they've been targeting particularly two types of genre when they're looking at social media. We're talking about grime and drill. And the barrister Cheryl Nwosu and also Dr. Lambros Fatis, the two in the image that you can see, they've said that actually the police who use like drill and grime to convict African people, they've got no expertise in African cultural traditions. What the hell are they doing? What do they know? That's a madness. That's like watching Kumo D and LL Cool J back in the day, or anyone who's had beef on social, hip hop artists, and saying that they're going to murder each other. It's like, it's a foolishness, and our young people need to be able to express themselves. In fact, sometimes what they don't understand is that what stops the violence actually materializing and manifesting on the streets is because they can express themselves in this creative way. But like I just said, £3 million of funding from the Home Office to spy on us on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. Project Alpha. Be careful. Next policing story is one about this officer, Luke Hunt, who was sacked for making racist comments to a colleague while he was off duty. And this is a good news story, I suppose, because we've spoken about in the past how some officers who have had enough investment from the force are given slaps on the wrist and they're not invested. But this particular case, PC Luke Hunt, he was based within the North East Command Unit. It doesn't look like a senior officer. He was sacked. He was dismissed without notice. There's not much information. All I know is that he did this while he was off duty, which is why I like this story. The misconduct took place I think it was a week ago. There's 3 days of evidence that was shared, and he was, he was charged with. They found that he breached standards of professional behaviour. This is quite good because it reminds police officers that they can't wear the uniform and pretend that they're upstanding characters and hide their racist values or their sexist and homophobic values, and then when they get home start kind of like being Al Garnett and saying all kinds of disgusting stuff on social media. So that's good news. Of course, it'll send shivers down the spine of racist police officers. They'll be petrified. Oh my God, I can't even be racist in my own home. Well, nah, if you're going to be racist in your own home, don't become a police officer. No, that's as simple as that, really. And it's just a reminder also that in August, there was Thomas Phillips. Thomas Phillips was jailed after using the N-word in WhatsApp to his former partner, Samantha, because she was a serving police officer and she'd broken up with him and started going out with a new boyfriend, and that boyfriend was a serving officer, so he started sending her racist messages with the N-word. So I'm guessing that Samantha's new boyfriend was a brother. I'm just guessing this, but he was actually jailed after doing that. So it's just understanding this line, because some people think that, well, if the police don't say anything while they're in a uniform, then when they're off duty, they can just be as disgusting as they want. And that's how domestic abuse happens, right? As we've heard stories about police officers abusing their partners and using their badge to kind of shield them from scrutiny. But actually, this is a good thing. Sister Oleander, I can see you up here.
Yeah, I've got 3 comments from Mr. The Fall 3. The first one is, and yet I'm still going to see people on social media claiming that rappers need to be held accountable and are to blame for violence in the community, etc., etc.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember this respectability politics. I'm not a fan of use of the N-word at all in music, in art, in society. I want to expunge, and I don't particularly like some of the stuff that some of the young people are doing personally. But does it cause the violence of society? No. Does it create an environment where it could be more normalized? Yes, I do think that. But does it cause it? No. If that was the case, when I was playing Doom or Wolfenstein 3D on my PC back in the day, or even forget when I started playing Tekken, why didn't I go down the street and start going Hadouken? I mean, when I was playing Street Fighter, why? So we know that this has always been a simple scapegoat, saying that stuff in the media, things in culture, these kind of things are causing it. And it's always easy to say that young people are so thick, so stupid that they see something on video and they go out and replicate it. But like I said, it's not conflating the fact that is it healthy, because it clearly isn't. I have no space for those jokers, those clowns in the music industry that actually poison us spiritually. But I've never liked that argument. So thank you for raising that point, because what's his name? Bill Cosby was one of those. There's many of them. We have many of them. Respectability politics, where they kind of like snub their nose down at those of us who use that as a form of escapism, and it's always peed me off a bit. Sorry for my rant. Yes.
And then he says, heard this kind of talk for decades, and to put it bluntly, the solutions I've heard only get more fascist and disciplinarian.
Yes, well said. Definitely agree.
And then he says, you cannot fix a systemic issue with just extreme discipline. It's never worked.
No.
And Tekken Jedi says, Cosmic Jedi says Tekken is legend.
Oh yeah, man, definitely. I mean, that's what made the PlayStation 2, right? It's kind of like, I mean, I know Wipeout was good, but Tekken, another level. But
and just one question that Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation is asking you about what time is the event on Tuesday?
Oh, it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I mean, yes. For those of you who don't know, it's like I do an open classroom session, which is part of my lecture or my module on nationalism, ethnicity, and race. And the open classroom is taking place in the IDPAD Centre in Hackney. There is a registration link, so you'd have to go through one of the old programs to find it, but it might be closed. But it takes place at 9 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we will open up, around 8:30, 1:45, but we start promptly because I have to then get back to uni to teach other classes straight away. Kind of like, so there's a little gap there. I know this module's one's a bit awkward because it's so early in the morning, while the one that I do next year is normally on a Friday afternoon, which is a really easier time. But those of you registered, you are welcome to attend. But yeah, thank you. Okay, let me move on to the next story. I think that is, yes. I don't need to spend much time on this one. We probably won't surprise you that there's a new stop and search scheme. There always is a new stop and search scheme being invented, which is going to solve the crime, solve all the problems in the world, and and prove that the police aren't being racist. Well, anyway, this new scheme's come out. It's using what's called serious violence reduction orders, SVROs. And these are court orders that run from between 6 months to 2 years. And that actually allows officers to search people who have been convicted of an offence that involved a bladed weapon in the past, or any kind of offensive weapon, even if there's no immediate grounds for thinking they are carrying one at the time. And some people seem to think this is a way forward, that if you've been convicted of carrying a knife or something, then even if you've served time in prison, even if you've rehabilitated yourself, therefore you should be okay to be searched continuously to stop you from doing it. So obviously the prison time isn't enough because you've done the time, but you're still being treated as if you're doing another crime. But of course, if you're right-wing orientated, you'll be okay with that, unless of course I said that. What about those who did drugs at Liverpool Street? If you've been caught with narcotics, then every time you leave Liverpool Street in the bank, you should be searched and given a blood test just to make sure that you haven't continued to take narcotics. I don't think they would be quite so happy with an approach like that. But in this particular case, there's some research by the Runnymede Trust, and they've revealed that this pilot scheme, is not going to reduce serious violence, of course not, and B, it's going to disproportionately target people from minority ethnic backgrounds. Now a good friend, colleague, I should say, Dr. Tim Head, who, kind of like works and helps organise the amazing Hackney account group. He said that one of the striking things about the government's introduction of serious violence reduction orders is that there's absolutely no evidence that has been cited to support their rollout. And so again, these quick orders, these quick changes to the criminal justice system seem like, this is a common sense approach and stuff like that. This is going to change things. But actually what they do is that they alienate and harm and harass and violate the well-being and lead. And I won't say they lead people to crime. That's wrong for me to say that. But what they do is that they make it difficult for people to reintegrate into society so that they can actually become a part of society. There's the very factors that kept them out, which made them able to kind of like take actions that were transgressive. They can't resolve, they can't get away from, as they keep them in that life. And I'm not saying we have to be soft on those that are using weapons and stuff. That's far from what I'm saying. I as a father, as an uncle, as a community member, as a human being, I don't want to see any young person, or any person, being harmed with violence. And and I know there are young people in our community that use weapons in a way that is unforgivable, and I want them off the streets. But victimizing and targeting those that are rehabilitated themselves after making a mistake, and let's be sure about that. A lot of times when young people end up hurting someone with a knife, it's either it's also through self-defense, it's also through fear. It's a one-off mistake. They're petrified. I was quite fortunate to be raised by my father, so you might know, my father, I raised in a single parent family. My father, me, my sister. And I do remember the time when I got to an age when I was teenager, and I believed that my father couldn't protect me from what was going on in the streets. And I got a knife. I got a pocket knife, and I used to carry it until my dad found out. And he didn't use violence, but he did slap sense into my head, and I stopped using it. And so, I understand the thinking, and it's love. God, it sounds so corny. What it is, it's love, it's discussion, it's reasoning, it's having a safe space to talk, it's having an understanding. that changes these kind of things, finding solutions towards it. If you keep treating people like criminals, if you keep treating them like they're animals, if you keep treating them like they're not humans, then why do you expect a different outcome? Why do you expect them to kind of treat other people in humane ways? It's very, very difficult. So yeah, I'll leave that there. Yeah, not, you know what I mean, because that's just an irritating piece, and it's a good piece of work by the Runmedy Trust. It makes me think. In fact, that's what Legali needs to come back and start doing, this kind of research. But you know, that's something for another day. Okay, the last story for this section, surprise, surprise, is that the senior police officer involved in the Stephen Lawrence investigation was actually corrupt. Now you might think, huh? What do you mean was actually corrupt? Well, there was an investigation into whether he was corrupt. He said, bring it on, and they cleared him. But now we know, years afterwards, that actually one of the people who gave evidence in that to clear him was also one of the people who was a suspect, or the father of the suspect who killed Stephen Lawrence in April 1993. Now, Stephen was murdered when he was 18. And so, you know, what can I say? I mean, this guy, Ray Adams, is now 81. He's always denied being corrupt. He uses the fact that he's never faced disciplinary action. He's never faced or had criminal proceedings against him. But, you know, the BBC did this investigation. And that's why I said I've got to be careful. The BBC is actually doing some good work. Even when they mess it up, they are doing some good work. And this investigation seems to confirm without doubt that he was corrupt. I mean, you know, and, you know, the investigation that looked into him was completely manipulated by him and other gangsters. You know, there were hitmen involved in all this sort of stuff. So if we ever wonder why it took so long and why we still don't have, you know, all of Stephen's killers in jail, then understand that even though the Met might be seen to clean house right now, there are some legacy injustices that, you know, I mean, I think about the situation with Sean Rigg, and there's that officer, right? The one that we now know was, you know, sitting as chair of some of these corruption and corrupt cops inquiries, and we now know he was also dealing, you know, well, I'll say he was taking drugs. He was as bent as they come. And so there's a lot of these legacy cases, a lot of them, which really need us to investigate them. But we don't have the resources. Well, that's not fair. We have a lot of money in our community. What we don't have is a certain level of organization to kind of like hire the right people in our community. You shouldn't have to hire them. We should be able to do it free, but we've all got to eat. To hire some of those students that leave universities with these analytical minds and say, here's a big wad of money, investigate this and be as, you know, as thorough as you can be, and just bring back the truth, even if it's a damning truth. Just bring it back so we can have closure. So we have to rely on the BBC to do it for us, and the BBC is not really for us. Sometimes it is, like in this case. But okay, let me move on to the next section. That's the end of that. Let's try. We are quarter past. Programs seem to be getting longer and longer. I'm going to try and wrap this up quickly, but without skimming things. So we're watching. What's the script? You're watching the Legali Pan-African Community News Update, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You know what to do by now. Sister Oleander's in the studio. Message, blah, 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 blah. Let's keep going. Health-related stuff over the last couple of weeks. So the first story is one of Isaac Harvey, and Isaac Harvey is an amazing disability advocate. He is president of Wheels and Wheelchairs, and he was born with a condition called hyperlepsia. Now, you know, I won't go into all the details. All I will say is that he has since then learned how to do incredible things with his feet and mind, and he still goes around his daily business, overcoming these challenges and barriers. Now, one of the things that's important to remember is that you know, even if you are disabled, and it's important to remember that you are disabled, it's society that disables you. This is a really good case to understand of how that happens. So our brother Isaac wants to go to a party. He traveled from London to Cambridge. It was a long journey. But then when he got off at Cambridge, he couldn't leave the station because of a broken lift. Now people think, what's a broken lift? Well, what, just use the stairs or whatever. But actually, no, that's not how it works. It's like, you know, we as a society have to recognize that we have to make sure there are backup plans. There's always a plan B. There's always a system to make sure that those who are disabled can still be able, that they can still move around. And so eventually, despite them knowing him coming, despite all the time he spent over there, everyone involved in it, he had to go back home. I mean, it was a 9-hour trip, so he couldn't go to his event. I think it was a party. One of the staff members at Cambridge told him that the lift was regularly out of order. Even if the lift was out of order, this is what I'm trying to explain. Even if the lift was out of order and they knew it was out of order, and he'd booked his ticket, they could have sent him a message saying, "Don't get off at Cambridge, and we'll get a taxi to you from the station before, the station after," or something, because they should have known. But they just didn't think about him. And this is the problem about living in an able-bodied society. I talk about racism, I talk about sexism and misogyny, I talk about homophobia at times, I talk about issues that we have on other levels. But I think we don't often think about able-bodiedness, and we don't think about disabilities. And this is something we have to think about. His plight shouldn't have come up on my radar simply because he's of African heritage. We should all be aware of this. I think we've spoken in the last couple of programs about people suffering with ADHD and ADD. And I'm learning more as we go on through it. We learn about people who are with autism. We're learning about these different conditions that affect the lives of all human beings. And the thing about disability, which is really interesting, is that everybody, every single human being, they say 1 in 4, but I think it's even higher than that, will at some stage in their life acquire something that disables them. And if we want to live in a society that we think is I don't like using the word civilized, but we think is kind of like claiming to be civilized, then we must also use the resources that we have to find provisions to enable everybody. And that's not what's happening. So I'm going to leave that one there. What he said, he made a comment. It shows how one lift can make such a big impact, because of that one lift failing, all the rest of it happened. Him having to go back, him missing the day. It's just not right. It's just not right. Okay, so the next story is one about, it's a good news story. It's not a news story, but there's a new element towards it. Let me, again, I don't want to get into too much detail. This is about a new treatment for sickle cell, which is called Casgevy. I mean, that's the product name. It's basically spleen or gene editing. And it's actually been passed now by the MHRA. MHRA are the Medicines and Health Products Regulatory Agency. I hate acronyms. Anyone who knows me knows I hate acronyms. The MHRA. And basically it's a treatment that's now available for patients at age 12 and over. So it specifically helps people with blood disorders like sickle cell, or what they call transfusion-dependent beta thalassemia. So if you have those two conditions, and and this is, I don't even like saying this, because there's this thing about whether they're quite serious. They're all serious, but sometimes they often wait for you to have a stroke or something before they give you these treatments. They won't let anyone have it because they're expensive, which is again another big challenge, another big problem. But the good news is that this treatment is available now in the NHS. There was a clinical trial. There was around 45 patients who took it. They had to wait for a couple of years to try to see what the results, what the side effects are. And what they found out is that of those that took it, over 97% have been living free of crisis for at least 12 months. And that's quite amazing. So that, I mean, for those of you who want to know a little bit about the science, essentially what this treatment does, it used to be called bone marrow transplant, but now, we use stem cell transplant. It's essentially the same thing. You have cells that produce blood. They go into the cell, they cut out the bits that are creating the sickle, so they maybe put it back inside you, it regrafts on your bone. And so when the new cells or new blood cells are being generated, they no longer have sickle. And this has always been very challenging. Even if you're using your own cells, sometimes you have to get the cells from a sibling because the body could reject them. So this treatment seems to be going really, really well. The sample size, I said, is quite small. There's only been 45 patients have had it, but a 97% success rate, or at least it doesn't mean a crisis free, but having been without a major crisis for 12 months for someone with sickle cell is amazing. In fact, the image of the person you see there's a name is Jimmy Oleander, and he said it's like being born again. It's like you're constantly living in a war mindset where that every single day you're going to be dealing with some kind of challenges, and now after the treatment he just feels completely free. And so this is actually really good news, but it doesn't mean that this is a treatment that everyone's going to have access to. it doesn't mean that treatment everyone should have access to, because some people don't want to take these kind of treatments for different reasons. Sometimes they're spiritual reasons, they're valid reasons as well. But at least it's another treatment that's available for those that definitely need it. And the reason why it's important that we have these treatments available is because right now there's around 15,000 people, I think it's even more, in the UK who have sickle cell disorder. If you start thinking about people with sickle cell trait, I think it goes even higher. And the statistics say that there's around 300 babies born every single year in the UK with sickle cell. So this is just talking about in the UK. If we talk about on a global level what's happening on the continent, we don't hear about what's happening on the continent of Africa, and babies and children and patients who are dying from sickle cell without access to treatment. We don't hear about what's happening in the Caribbean. We don't hear what's happening in the Americas. So having this therapy available is a good treatment. But like I said, it's very, very expensive from what I've heard. I'll try and get the costings for you and stuff like that. So it's something that they ration out only after, you've been made blind or you're facing death after a and I've always had a challenge with that. And that's obviously to do with racism as well, as capitalism and racism intersecting in a certain way. Okay.
Hi. Yeah. I was just going to say that actually, when I went to a sickle cell conference recently called ASCAT, which is a global conference for people who deal, well, I suppose, pharmaceutical companies, consultants, etc. And anyway, so there was some scientists that were showing some work that they had done, and someone from the audience spoke up about racism is still a major factor in the care for people with sickle cell. And the scientist up there on the stage in front of, 500 people said, "We're scientists, we can't be racists." So that just shows you that they just don't have a clue that even the way that they do their own research has a bias already. They don't even see that, much less the racism that's all entwined with that. So anyway, I thought I'd just mention that because we were all just like, oh my God, can't believe it. Okay, so Cosmic Jedi says, I think this was to do with the previous slide. The environment, the seeds planted in our minds from early, all play a role in the disorder that's going on from this nation. There's a clear point of origin of these problems. And then he says, Ancestral Voices is actually doing a show today on ADHD and neurodivergent in relation to African spirituality. That's quite interesting.
Well, I mean, first of all, the work done by Verona and Dalian on Ancestral Voice is amazing. And the use of spirituality in our healing practice is something that's really ignored for far too long. So, I mean, I didn't know they were doing a program, and I want to big up the work that they've been doing consistently. Not just over in their films, but also just the practice that they do. So thank you for sharing that. And I think the previous, when you talk about infrastructure, I think you might be talking about the music and the stuff that we're exposed to, our children are exposed to, is not by accident. So
yeah.
Thank you.
I think I've just realized this was a message specifically for Cosmic Jedi. So, but anyway, he's just saying, Mr. I3 Black Reparation Nation, I'm responsible for the addition of the Capoeira character. I was working with Namco as European product manager for video games.
Oh, wow. That's amazing to learn that.
And Cosmic Jedi says, no way, seriously, that's awesome. Yeah. And then I'll just read this last one and I won't read any more from that thread. Cosmic Jedi, they asked me to suggest some new fighting characters for Tekken. I researched black martial arts and discovered capoeira in Brazil. Lovely.
Yeah, there's an amazing film called Busuru, which draws upon that spiritual practice and the fighting. And again, it talks about enslavement and African fighting and spirituality. It's an amazing film for those who haven't seen it. And yes, it's this is a part of our heritage. I mean, we did a libation to Zumbi, but it's a part of our heritage that we don't know because of the way we are marginalized. So you know, some of us are thinking sense of the Anglophone kind of territory, and some of us thinking the Francophone territories and the Portuguese, and we're kept separate. This is why I'm a Pan-Africanist, when actually we have something to learn from each other because we are each other, and that's a difficult challenge for many of us to get. But thank you for sharing that, and that's amazing work that you did there, brother. Let me move on though, and the next slide talks directly to the issue that Sister Oleander was just talking about, because this is actually a report that's just been released. It's a follow-up to a previous report by Sickle Cell Society. This one's called "The Difference Between Life and Death," and it highlights the shortage of specialist sickle cell nurses and what that has, the impact that has on patients and their carers. And it's true. I mean, you know, there are some who believe that, you know, medical practitioners or researchers and scientists can't be racist. It's complete nonsense. I say that as a researcher. But on the ground, in the hospitals themselves, when you have a shortage of nurses or, you know, staff, clinical staff who have specialism in sickle cell, the difference is literally like life and death. You know, I think we spoke about this before, not, you know, maybe last year or the year before, the case of is it Evan and Nathan Smith. He was a 21-year-old who rang 999 from his hospital bed, calling for oxygen because they didn't believe that his crisis was that serious, and he lost his life. You know, he died from that, from them not taking care of him. There was also the case of Tyrone Erie, 46 years of age. He passed away from a morphine overdose. Now, both of these deaths were, you know, completely avoidable, and they're really the results of oversights by insufficiently trained healthcare professionals. Now, I know that Sister Oleander and I, you know, we've been part of a group. I've not been as hands-on as I used to be, called Solace SG, which is the peer-to-peer support group. It's an amazing support group of patients who are sickle cell in Hackney and the City of London, who come together and work to kind of improve the service and actually just take care of each other. And I remember that, you know, one of the things we used to have to do was provide training as a peer group to remind the staff that, you know, that we're humans. You know, but without that thinking about, you know, how these simple differences, like when someone's having a crisis and you just ignore them because you think they say they're in pain, but you can't see any blood, you can't see any gaseous wound because the blood's running inside their veins. You don't actually understand it because you just don't have the expertise. But those decisions are literally the difference between life and death. So, I mean, I want to big up John James and the Sickle Cell Society for kind of like raising this point and following up on that original report that he did with this one. But I don't want to be saying this every single year. I mean, the NHS has issued a statement. They go, the NHS continue to promote e-learning to support healthcare professionals to improve their knowledge on the condition or how to spot a crisis and blah, 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 blah. But it's not good enough. And you know, it is tricky. I understand that there's only a certain amount of time that nurses get training on all the things they have to learn. And, you know, part of that is like, well, how much training can they get for sickle cell when they've got to learn about all these other conditions? But that's the reason why we may need specialist nurses. And I say this, and I'm also going to say the other side as well, that when you do have a specialist nurse or specialist clinicians, and we have had some amazing consultants who look after our family and our son and you know, our mother-in-law, who's now an ancestor and stuff like that. We've had some amazing, it makes the world of difference. When our boy was born, the life expectancy for someone with sickle cell was in the early 20s. And, you know, it was because of this issue about being overdosed with morphine, about not attention being paid to crisis. And now that has changed. You know, now people with sickle cell can make it into their late 70s, 80s, even older than that. And like with this gene splicing, the possibility for change can take place. But I can never forget the fear that Sister Oleander and I had of thinking, how are we going to maximize our boy's life? What do we have to do? And we have to become experts on this topic. And that's a heavy burden to place on parents who are dealing with the transformation in their life. Anyway, that's the end of that one. That topic. I'm going to move on to the last section for the program. And this one is my favorite part of the program, actually. It's what we call being positive. And you are watching the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. Just before we go, you are more than welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter as ever. You can subscribe, so please don't forget if you want to do that. You can like, you can share. It's good to know that some of you are with us. That makes a world of difference to us, knowing that you're out there and interacting with us, because we don't get paid for this. This is just done out of love for our community. And if you find this broadcast useful, tell others about it. Anyway, this is some of the positive stories that have come up over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, we can't cover everything. It's a news program, but we try to leave some positivity out there. So the first story is a cute one. It's a bit mushy. It's about a mother. Her name is Catherine Boake. She's founder of Mango Tree Kids, which is an African-themed drumming workshop and educational resource business. But it's dedicated to providing our children with positive representations of their heritage. And so what she decided to do was that actually, she's a serial entrepreneur. She was on Dragon's Den. She'd come on every other week and win it. And she said, look, when a child steps into a princess dress, they should feel beautiful. They should complement who they are. So you know what she did? She designed them. She designed the princess dress, made sure they're unique, and they used kente cloth. And this design, she put it out there. It was snapped up by John Lewis, and they used it as in their Christmas pop-up shop. Now, I think today was the last day. They did it. I think it was a couple of weeks ago they started it, and today was the last day of the presentation. Hopefully, they're completely sold out. But yeah, amazing. It's always good if you have an idea. If you think that it's a good idea, you think that it might help others, and if you can, go for it. Don't be frightened. Our sister Catherine is also the same one who won the case against Mango. And those of you who are new to the program, you may not know that what happened. We reported on the case where when she started her business, and she's been running her business for 20 years, there's a retailer called Mango. I'm not familiar with them, but they sued her, saying that she's got to change her name. And she's like, well, Mango Tree has been my business name for 20, X amount of years. And she refused to drop the names. So she was, obviously everyone's frightened. You kind of get worried, like they've got so much resources, but she did not back down, and she still kept the name. She won. So for me, it's a really good story. It's just a reminder that, we have to stand firm at times. Sometimes you have to hold your ground. What's that? There's that tune that Beverly Knight does. Hold up, set up, and hold your ground. I can't remember it now. It'll come back to my head. No bigger than we, no bigger than us. It'll come to me. It's a bad tune though. And I can't sing. I shouldn't even try to sing on the mic. Oh my God, I've probably lost 100 million viewers for life now. To the next slide. This one's about her story. And this is, a simple project. I'll say a simple project, but it's about three sisters, or it's about, so I say three sisters, about a group of sisters coming together. Shah Grant, Afria Henry Fontaine, Kamali Scott Jones, and Cheryl Norsu. So that's not three, that's four. Learn how to count, Toyin. They formed a collective called BMC. Now, it's not the same one as Brother Kwaku's BMC, and they had a great event yesterday that I attended. So it's not Black Music Congress, it's the Black Music Collective. I hate acronyms, and I hate it when we had two groups with the same names. It always causes problems. But what they did is that they decided to put together a project called Her Story, and it's done in partnership with Sony Music. And the mission is quite simple, just to uplift African music, or African women in music. They've been running for 2 years, or 3 years now, because they started in 2020. They started in a WhatsApp group chat. And they've been pushing past all these kind of tokenistic representations in the music industry, from the black squares and statements of solidarity, etc., and coming to this point now where they really want to launch this project and make a difference. So, give them a bit of support. Let's see what they do with it. It's really important and stuff like that. And yeah, Her Story. So yeah, piece of good news. The next one is Believe UK. Now, this is three sisters. This is what was in my mind when I talked before. And this is about three sisters who lost their mother in 2012. And they decided, you know what? We're going to turn our grief into a force for good. And so they created an organization that simply empowers young women. And that was it. That was, like in 2012, like 11 years on. And, the sisters are still running an organization. They're calling out now for mentors to empower and support 100 young girls in achieving their full potential. But since their formation, they have actually helped and worked with 15,000 young women. So I think that's an amazing accomplishment. And the fact they're looking to expand and get more mentors is actually it's amazing. It's lovely. So that's it. I mean, well, sometimes the best ideas are very simple. You learn from your experience and you help others. And that's what Believe UK is. So I pick up the sisters, Marsha, Rochelle, and Chloe Powell. And they're based in Lewisham. So Believe. The next story builds upon that same theme. We had in our libations a remembrance to baby Damali. And in her honor, her mother, Sister Aisha Peters, she set up Damali Beautiful Vision CIC, and that's support people of African, Asian heritage, any who's navigating their bereavement that's come about through the sudden transitioning of a young child or adult. And that's really important. It's the fact that it is a sudden transition, so you don't have time to prepare. No one's really ready for that. And so she's using her grief in a similar way to help others. And she's got an introductory open day that's going to take place on Monday, the 4th of December. So, if you want, and if it's something that could help you, please check out Damali Beautiful Vision CIC. They're going to offer heritage and cultural therapy services. And I think they're going to launch at the HCVS. I think that's what Sister Oleander told me. But, check out their website. It's online. And, again, it's a beautiful mission. It's a beautiful idea. And it's just us learning from our experiences and sharing and caring enough to help others.
Also, Toyin, just to say that the event is a free event as well. So that so people just need to they need to go on the website and get the link. I think it's on Eventbrite, but there must be a link on the website so that you can actually get yourself a ticket. Tickets are limited, so but it's definitely a worthwhile event to go to. I will be there myself. So yeah.
Wonderful, and that's in Hackney, London, I should say as well.
Yes, that's in East London, Hackney.
Okay, thank you. And okay, the next section. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this every single broadcast, but I had fun doing it last week, and I'll do it again now very quickly. And it's just a short comment on something that bugs me for the week, for the last couple of weeks. And this one is, so I call it an opinion section, very short. Do you remember that awful Jerry Springer? And he had that little thing, Jerry's Corner or something like that. Well, this is my equivalent of that. And I'm just wondering, basically why supporting the ceasefire. The ceasefire matters. And like you've probably heard by now that there's been a ceasefire in the conflict with Palestine and Israel. And there's been exchange of prisoners and hostages, and that's been really beautiful to see, and children uniting with their parents and stuff like that. And I just want to say that with this recent conflict, where the innocent lives of I think it's around 30 Israeli children in October, and thousands of Palestinian children have died. One of the things we've noticed is that Gaza itself has earned the nickname of a graveyard for children. And I think the reason why I thought I'd talk about it is because just a couple of days ago, it's World Children's Day. And I didn't hear anything about it, nothing whatsoever. And World Children's Day is one of these UNESCO things, like the IDPAD, the International Decade for People of African Descent. But it's a moment to reflect on the heavy toll paid by young people under the age of 18 in current conflicts around the world. And so I just thought, we just need to remember, with all the stuff that's going on, it's like, last week, I think it was the 14th, 8 children were killed in a conflict in Congo. In the past 14 months, there was around 500 children killed in Ukraine. But, the next one, it's like, I think about Sudan. There are 14 million children. And I'm not saying they've all died, but what I'm saying, they are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. They don't have water or clean water. They don't have education. And what's breaking my heart is that they are living in a state of perpetual fear. They're frightened of being killed, of being injured, of being recruited to become soldiers in this conflict. And so we're living in a world right now where we seem incapable of even protecting children. And so I just want us just to think about why ceasefires matter. From Africa to Gaza, it doesn't matter where it is. We need to honor, we need to protect children It's so important. That's where the politics just stops about, I am from this background, I am this ethnic group. It don't matter when it comes to children. So that's all I'm going to say on it. It's just something that touches me, because even in these stories I've been talking about, a lot of them also infect young people and children. But I just thought this is supposed to be the World Children's Day, and I didn't hear nothing. I don't know if you did, maybe you did, but I didn't hear nothing on the news. Nothing. And children are losing their lives left, right, centre in these not unavoidable, these is completely avoidable and man-made conflicts. And I say man-made conflict because most times or not, they are. Okay, last couple of slides. So there's a, what can I say? There's going to be a silent walk for Grenfell on the 14th of December, 2023. It's really important to remember that we should not forget about Grenfell. Children were killed there as well. I mean, no one's been held accountable. We've heard ministers saying that will never again, and we've had all the stuff. Michael Gove and his housing ministry, or I've forgotten what's the Minister of Housing and Communities, or some crap name he's got now. Nothing's changed, but more importantly, there's been no justice. So it's really important to remember that. And the Grenfell family is calling for us to attend, and I've always attended whenever I can. So if I can attend on that day, I'll be there. Thursday, I should be. I'll be teaching on that day. So I'll make it straight after I finish teaching. I'll go down. But we can't forget, because those families haven't had justice, and that's all of us in there. The next event that I want to talk about is one, and this is for those of you, you might think, I've seen that face before. Where do I recognize that face? Well, that's Dr. Abiola Ogunshola. And one of the many reasons I'm actually here right now talking to you and sharing is because she was my educational mentor. When I decided that I want to learn how to create my own university, how to build my own university to help people who can't afford it so they can come in and get access to knowledge. And I remember saying that I'll have to go through the whole system. Well, she was saying, like, Toyin, you sure you need to do an undergrad? It's like, you should just go straight in for masters, straight in. Your experience will just take you all the way through. I said, no, I've got to start from the beginning. And she nurtured me, and she reminded me of the ability of education to change and transform communities. And she ran a module called, or not a module, a whole section called Educom at the University of East London, which is where I did my undergrad. Now, it's the 10th year memorial for our sister. It's been organised by her son, Oleander. It's taking place on Sunday, the 10th of December. It's going to be at Dulwich Library. It's going to be a bit tricky. I'm going to be there. I mean, I think I'm flying back on the same day, and either the same day or the night before. And then there's this, and then there'll be another program. We'll be broadcasting on that same day. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge. I'll probably be very exhausted. Might even have to broadcast from the library if I can't get back here from Dulwich to Hackney in 3 hours, because it takes time to prepare the program. But if you know her, if she touched your life, if she meant something to you, or you just kind of want to learn a bit more about her, please get in touch. Please drop by. She was an amazing, remarkable woman, and we remember. So that's the 10-year memorial of Dr. Abiola Ogunshola. I think you can get details from her son, Oleander. You might be able to find that on Eventbrite, or just go to Dulwich Library and ask them for contact details. Okay, what else is there? So this is, I suppose, a plug. I don't normally do plugs, but if I see an opportunity that's worthwhile, I like to share it. And this is a scholarship program from UCL. It's for people of African or Asian heritage. It's based on merit and for financial circumstances. So if you're interested in doing a master's or doing a master's stroke PhD, please think about applying. It's really important. We need more of us who are, they're leaning to our nerdy selves, who aren't, ashamed to be interested in detail, interested in fact, interested in learning knowledge, sharing knowledge, creating knowledge. But I think that places like UCL are impossible to penetrate. It's a Russell Group University. I'll tell you straight up front, I ain't ashamed to say it. I came through UCL through a scholarship program. I'm a working class background and didn't have much money. But I did well in education. my degree with our sister doctor, now ancestor, Biola Goshala. I graduated with first class degree, and then I did my master's and I got a distinction. And so if you are a nerd, if you really love studying, and that's the key here, you have to really love studying. You have to be prepared to put the work in. But if you're prepared to put the work in, then go for it. Please look at the program, go online, type it into Google and go for it. Deadline's the 12th of January, so there's plenty of time. If you're really stuck and you don't know, there's questions and stuff and you need some help, I know that I am awful with email. I can only apologize. It's not deliberate. It's just my workload is really, really intense. But I will try and help if I can. But if it's something you've always wanted to do, you've wanted to do a master's, you want to do a PhD, you've got to have a good track record, even if you haven't. You've got to have a degree generally, but even if you didn't do brilliantly for your degree, but you've done things afterwards that show that you've got this good track record, go for it. I can't stress that enough. Too many of us have imposter syndrome. We think that we can't get in, and that's what keeps us out. And so that's that done really. And this is the penultimate slide. What can I say really? Yesterday, I think I mentioned it. I was at an African Coalition Day event at Westminster. It was amazing to see the protest that was taking place in Palestine around that. I wish the turnout was more. There was amazing discussions, amazing play, and everyone who was there was supposed to be there. Seen Auntie Jean, some amazing artists, amazing activists, Elder Minka, some amazing comments. A play was hilarious, but also edifying and edutainment. Unfortunately, I missed our brother Andrew Mohammed, who gave a keynote speak. By the time I got there, he had gone. But it's really important that we continue to organise, we continue to do these things. And I thought, because I made a libation, a remembrance to Kwame Ture earlier in the program, I thought it might be interesting just to remember some of the words that he said. And he asks, "Is it not violent for a child to go to bed hungry in the richest country in the world?" And I thought I put the quote on screen because when I talk about World Children's Day, we often think about children in regions of the world that are socially, economically disadvantaged. So we think about in Africa, we think in Asia, we think where in the world, in the Middle East, and where there's always problems. But actually, that's not just there. I spoke about Grenfell. I can speak about Hackney. I can speak about like food banks in the belly of the beast in the Americas. So I'm just trying to say to you, it's like, think about the children. Structural violence takes place everywhere, not just in those places where we see those Oxfam and those charity adverts. And I think we all have a moral duty to do something about it. So I'm going to leave it there and go to the last slide. Hopefully, I think there's some comments Sister Oleander might want to share. Before we sign off. This program's taking much longer than I'd actually hoped. So, Sister Oleander, for that, and all of you who have been with us, it's a lot to get through. It's supposed to be an hour long, but sometimes we just get a lot of news in as well. Anything you want to share before we sign off? Any?
No, there's no. It's just a conversation between Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation and. So yeah, there's not really anything there. Everton Bahadur Singh Young said, "Good job."
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
But yeah, just to say to everybody, I hope you're well and you continue to be well. Take care and see you on the other side. Hopefully by then, the frogs would have left my throat.
Yes, let's hope so. And from my point of view, I just say we will be back on the 10th of December. Like I said, we might be a little bit late or transmitting from the back of a car or tube, depends on how. I can't cycle and transmit at the same time from the 10th year memorial event for our sister Dr. Abiola. But that's the next date, the 10th of January. I will say then the next date will be on Sunday, the 14th of January, or Monday, the 15th of January in 2024, because that's the new term. So we'll take a break after the 10th of January, the 10th of December, and we'll come back. I'm thinking about, I've mentioned it before, I am thinking about moving to Mondays as opposed to Sunday. So if you've got thoughts on that, please feel free to share it with us. It's just that I'm losing all my weekends, and so I work literally 7 days a week, every single day, and I need to have a day where I can just play music or listen to music or just go for a walk. And so we may move the event to Mondays, but if it doesn't work, we can always come back to Sunday. So that's after, and I'll repeat that on the 10th of December when we have next week's program. Again, apologies for those of you who have sent emails and I haven't been able to respond to all the queries. I will get through to them. I do reply to everyone. It just takes me a bit of time. So please bear with me. It's very difficult for me to answer all emails during term time. Literally, it's just a capacity issue. I think I'm going to leave it there. I want to thank you for being with us on this journey and sharing your thoughts and comments. It's been lovely, and it helps us having you chatting and liking and all those kind of things. We see them, and it makes it worthwhile. I want to thank you, Brother Colin, of course, and ever for the research, all the legality supporters and community. We are looking to bring the legality website back. It is online, but it's hidden behind one of those security things. It's the same thing. I typed in the Jenga website, the joint enterprise project, and that's also been, if you don't have the security, the SSL tag, you can't access it. And so there are problems where the system's been changing to kind of like exclude and push certain websites off the internet. So that's the same thing with Legality. I'm going to have to rethink how we come back on Legality, but we're going to bring the website back. So even if I can't do the program, we'll still hopefully start publishing reports and start. That's what I really want to do, to be honest with you. I want to next year definitely want to spend 9 months producing reports, films, all the stuff Legality used to do to empower our community, especially now that I'm based where I am. That's a lot of rambling, talking. I think the last thing I want to say as well is that, and I'll put this out there now into the universe, if there's any of you who have the capacity to present this program for a time when I transition one day. I know I shouldn't say things like that, but just or whatever it is, start thinking about it. Start, and then maybe one day get in touch, because there will be a time when it'll be good to hand over the baton. I could provide the infrastructure, the training. That's something I'm planning to do, but think about that as well. So, thank you for being with us. And I'm going to say as ever, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us all. What good? Ashe.
Ashe.